There we go.
Okay. Um, Uh, Hello, everyone. My name is Candi Slobodnik. I work for Fidelity, and I hope you can see my shirt because it literally just came in the mail 30 minutes ago. I ordered it a couple weeks ago. I created it. Clearly, I'm becoming a little bit of a FinCEN nerd with all of the teachings I've been doing, and I thought, what better way to show my excitement, I guess, for FinCEN, and then to buy a shirt and put a Fidelity logo on it. So typically I would dress a little bit nicer, and I actually had a nicer shirt on for you guys, and then decided let's wear the t-shirt. Okay. So my name is Candi Slobodnik. Like I said, I work for Fidelity. I am in the division for education. So I was asked to come on and teach FinCEN to you all. I will tell you, I was in Idaho earlier this week teaching this, and what I told them, and I'm going to tell you all, this should not be the only class that you take on this topic. There's so much information that you need to be able to digest and really think about that I want to make sure that you're getting with your underwriter or underwriters to make sure you're preparing fully. So some of you, it might be the first time you've ever heard or even discussed FinCEN. Some of you, it might be a recap for part of it and then something new. Hopefully, you learn at least one new thing, if not more. But biggest thing is make sure you're reaching out to your underwriter partners. I know we at Fidelity have created so many resources. We have a decision tree that literally walks you through, is this reportable? And then each step along the way, stop, don't stop. We have a workbook to help you think about workflow and all that stuff that we have available for our agents. So if you're a Fidelity agent, reach out to Kim Majors. If you're not a Fidelity agent, completely fine. Reach out to your underwriters, and they will have similar content, I'm sure, for you as well. We are going to get started. And if you've viewed any of my presentations ever in your life, you know I love my dogs. So of course we got to throw them in there because how could I be the dog
I'll
lady
go put Maggie in.
any other way? Please make sure you mute yourself because if you talk bad about me and I hear it, I will be gravely sad. So there's my dogs, Dublin, Franklin, Henry, and Copper. We have two golden doodles, two Bernedoodles. And they are clearly loves of my lives. And I show them in every single one of these because, especially with the webinar, sometimes you kind of not nod off, but you quit paying attention because it is an hour long. And I know you need that CE credit, but these are kind of my commercial breaks. It's a way to get you back focused on the camera or the screen, because the next thing I'm going to talk about will be either a transition or something important. So I do have pictures throughout all of my presentations as a way to just say, hey, look back up from your phone or your other screen and pay attention to me because I'm going to talk about something important. If you have any questions, feel free to throw those in the chat. If I'm able to talk about them without going too far off the path, I will answer them within the course of this. But if not, my email will be at the end. Feel free to reach out to me, or like I said, any of your underwriters or reps are going to be able to help walk you through this information. So just a little bit of an agenda. I was going to start with determining whether that transactions were reportable. And as I was teaching it in Idaho, I realized some people don't understand what the rule is or where it's even coming from. So I decided to take a step back, and we're going to go through a little bit of part of what I give to realtors. It's kind of a realtor presentation of why is this in existence? Why are we even worrying about it? And then we'll get more into the nitty gritty of reporting and how you report and why we're doing all this. FinCEN is short for the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network. It is a federal government agency. It was part of the Treasury Department created by Congress. So this is not something that's state by state. It is a governmental department in which they proceed and make rules. But their mission is to go after those money launderers, those nefarious people out there that are doing bad things. And of course, Pablo Escobar comes to mind as he's out there with, his drug lord, and he's out there buying, selling drugs or whatever he may be in his crime syndicate. And they have all this drug money, but they need a way to what we call wash it or clean it. And what the federal government has found out or noticed is that they're taking those funds and washing them or cleaning them through the purchase of real estate. So purchasing real estate for cash primarily, because if they're getting a loan, probably not washing that money through cash. So in 2016, they started what we would call the GTOs, or the Geographic Target Orders. These orders started in Miami and New York, places where if I was going to say we're going to have money laundering or have a mob presence or any kind of I keep saying nefarious, but nefarious dealings, it's going to be Miami, New York. That makes sense to me. And they have in those counties or in those areas certain parameters in which agents that are within those areas have to report on cash transactions. Those GTO orders have now expanded to over 60 counties across the US. So these have been going on since 2016. So we're at about 9 years of those orders in place. And what they found out is when you have these orders, the agents in those areas are reporting on them. And what they're finding out is 42% of them were under some kind of suspicious activity report already. They had already been kind of being investigated in some fashion. 7% of them were actually being investigated by the FBI. So anytime you have a positive to an order like that, they got it in their heads, well, it's going so well in these 60 counties. Why don't we extend this nationwide? So this is why you're hearing about it now. So before, it wasn't anywhere in Arkansas. We didn't have to worry about it. Or, Missouri, Nebraska, Kansas, we didn't have to worry about these geographic target orders. But now we do, because instead of the geographic targeting orders, this new rule called the Residential Real Estate Rule, so it's RRER, you're going to see that acronym all over the place. What it's saying is instead of doing it per county, it's now across the board. So if you fit within this rule, this RRER rule, you now have to report regardless of where you are within the US. So that's why it's becoming important to you all. Now, here is the rule. It is final. We finally have the final rule now. If you've heard, back and forth, the rule is out there. You want to go read it, find it, read it. The federal regulation, it's a rule out there. The biggest thing you need to know is when does it apply to you or your clients? And we're going to go into each of these in more specificity down the road, because there are some exemptions or clarifications, but I want to start out from the very beginning. You're like, when does this even apply? If your transaction is residential, and just know that your definition of residential or real estate's definition of residential is not the same as the federal government. So there is time that commercial could be considered residential for purposes of reporting. We're going to get into that in a little bit. Then it has to either be cash or a hard money lender. It's going to be a non-institutional lender. Maybe a seller carryback could fall within this category. And again, we have some nuances. We're going to get into that, but I want to make sure you know the three bases. And then your buyer is an entity or a trust. Again, we're going to have some exemptions, but the three things, if you take nothing else, residential, cash, buyer is an entity or a trust. So if it's not one of those three things, ostensibly, we don't have to worry about it. You can move on down the road. So if the buyer is an individual, no worries, move on down the road to the next transaction. What is the purpose? And like we said, it's going after those terrorists and drug lords. I like to joke. I mean, in Miami, kind of makes sense. Like to me, like, yes, we could have that there. And I was just in Miami a couple of weeks ago. I could see how you might have some money laundering or something going on. No offense if you're from Miami. But I live in Spring Hill, Kansas, population like 500 people. The fact that money laundering happening there seems a little egregious. Of course, it could happen. So when we're rolling this out nationwide, think about all the rural places where we're now going to have to report. And if you tell a client, I have to report because of money laundering or we're trying to combat terrorism, they're going to be like, what the heck are you talking about? They might get a little offended. And so that's why we want to make sure that we are putting in your arsenal the right tools and the ways to explain this to your clients. So they know that this is a federal regulation. It's something you do have to report on, you have to be aware of. Again, that entities in trust. And I want to point out, because there are some misconceptions, the BOI reporting, the beneficial owner interest reporting that kind of went away last year because they narrowed it down to just foreign entities. That is not the same as this. So people think, oh, they got rid of that. I don't need to worry about that. That is not the case. This is a completely different rule. This rule goes into effect December 1st, 2025. December 1st, 2025. And it's any closing December 1st, 2025 or after. So think about in your transactions, when are you getting orders
This ring,
where somebody
but if
could,
y'all need
Kim, mute yourself, girlfriend. So if you, thank you. I can call out her out because I work with her. But if you are getting orders now and you know that they're going to close December 1st, 2025, you need to be gathering the information now that would be needed for the report. And we're going to talk about that information, but just think typically we're going to see those orders starting to come in October. Do know that I've heard rumblings of people who maybe they don't want to give you the information. They might move up their transaction to close earlier than December 1st. So be prepared for those last 2 weeks in November. They could increase in closings. People might want to close early. And just remember, that's always when Thanksgiving is. So you're going to have staff out or on vacation. You might have a couple days that you're closed. Just keep in mind, you might see a little bit of that push forward to because of it. So next up, we're going to talk about who is this going to affect if the buyer is implicated. So again, residential, cash, entity, or trust. So if the buyer is an entity or trust, and we now have to report on the buyer, the seller is now obligated to report as well. If the buyer is an individual, seller is not affected. But if the buyer have to report, we now have the seller. And if you've looked at the form that has to be filled out, it is 111 characters for the buyer. The seller is a little bit less than that, but it's a lot of information that is going to need to be gotten. That's not even a word. There's a lot of information that you're going to need to get from the buyer before you can move on down the road, before you can get that report filed. So just know buyers implicated, also the seller. And after that, after the closing, you'll have to handle, the title agent is the one responsible for that FinCEN reporting. There's some confusion here as well, because under the geographic target orders, the underwriter is actually the one responsible or has some liability there. And so in some instances, the underwriter was doing the reporting on behalf of the agent. In this particular case, the regulation makes it a responsibility of the title agent itself. So I don't know, or I don't foresee a lot of underwriters doing the reporting on your behalf. One, because if you designate a underwriter or a third-party vendor or anybody to report on your behalf, you have to designate it per property transaction. So just know that there will be some vendors that are going to come out and say, I can do this reporting for you. And I think that will be great. And I'm sure every underwriter will be doing the vetting of those vendors. You will just have to make sure that you're designating them on your behalf on every single transaction. You can't just sign a blanket agreement and say, hey, vendor, you're going to do this for me. Thanks so much. I appreciate it, and move on down the road. So even if I, the underwriter, was going to report on the title agent's behalf, the title agent would have to do a designation agreement for every single report that's out there. So form changes. Keep in mind, your title underwriter is likely going to require, or if they don't, I would highly suggest you start putting, or not now, but when we get closer to putting a requirement in your commitment stating that this information, if you fall within the federal rule you will be required to provide this information. Without this information, we might not be able to close. Obviously, it's going to look a lot more legal than that, but that's essentially what the requirement will say. If it's me, I would put it in every single commitment. I would make it boilerplate language, because if you only put it in when an entity's there, think about how many times you have an individual who's going into title, and then 2 days before they say, I changed my mind. I wanted to go on my dad's trust, or I want to switch it to my LLC. If they do that, you have to be able to uh, get the reporting and get all that information. And if you didn't have the requirement in there, you would have to update your commitment to put it in there. So for me, I'd rather put it in there. Melissa, are you able to mute? There you go. Thank you. I would just have it in every one. And then if it's not applicable, it's not applicable. Otherwise, it's CYA for you. I've been doing a lot of realtor presentations, and I would, if you haven't already, start educating your realtors now that this is coming. If they have investor clients and they're paying cash a lot, they're going to want to know about this so that they can be prepared. What I personally would be advising every realtor, and what I have been doing, is go out there and add some kind of terminology. And here's what Fidelity came up with to the purchase contract, so that it is in the purchase contract. Because now then, if the buyer says, I don't want to provide you that information, well, they're in violation of their purchase contract if they don't. And then there's other remedies out there. So I would love for this to be put into every realtor contract. I know in the different areas, people are going through the realtor groups. If you're a promulgated form state where you can just go and have one form added, even better. But really think about how you're talking to realtors. Every time I've talked to one, they are, one, have no idea this is happening. And then two, so grateful for the information. Fidelity, we have resources that we can give you to help prepare your realtors. Like we have flyers and stuff like that. So again, reach out to your underwriters or your reps, because they're going to be able to help you educate those, the realtors or your other clients who this might apply to. So charging, this is the other thing to think about. There is a lot of time, and I'm going to switch back and forth between these next two slides. FinCEN estimates 2.5 to 2.75 hours to file one of these reports. And again, once technology gets on board, I think some of that goes away, because you're able to pull some of that data from your software system or something like that so that the form's pre-populated. But it's going to take some time to just file the report. They're averaging 2 hours for just collecting it, 30, 45 minutes to file the report. Right now, that's taking somebody's time within your company that you're not getting paid for. Industry costs, look at that, $400 to $663 million per year that they believe that this will put on the real estate market or the real estate industry in reporting and doing all of this compliance under this regulation. Of course, Alta has been urging them to narrow the scope, and we would love for that to happen, but nothing's happened yet, and we have to keep on moving down the road. I will tell you, Ohio Attorney General has filed suit against FinCEN, saying that it's going to be a burden on their small, title agents, their businesses. Fidelity has also filed suit against FinCEN in Florida. So because it's federal, we were able to pick the jurisdiction. We picked Florida. So we do have a suit out there. Haven't had a lot of movement. I believe it's going to be they're going to look at summary judgment and try to get something out before December 1st. But just because there's lawsuits out there doesn't mean you shouldn't be preparing, because even though it might not happen December 1st, it could get pushed back. And a lot of people say, I wish it would just get pushed back a couple years. Well, or a couple months. Think about, though, your company is typically going to be slower in December and January. If I was implementing a new system or a new process, I'd much rather do it in January and February than have it become effective in April or March, when you start getting all that ramp up for summer business and everything else. Okay, so I have a question. So this may seem like a silly question, so forgive me in advance. You know how we check OFAC on every order. Is there something we need to be checking for FinCEN also at the search and exam aspect? So I don't think that's a silly question. It's not so much search and exam. It's going to be more order entry. So if you see in your purchase contract that there is an entity or a trust going into title, you should be sending that client notification in your welcome packet saying, I see that you're going into title. We are going to need additional documentation due to this federal regulation. So it's not something that you'd be able to just search and see. It's really got to be that purchase contract. Do know that Fidelity has a sample letter for our agents to send out in their welcome packet. So again, reach out to Kim or Tron and they'll be able to get you that if you're a Fidelity agent. But there's ways out there, but the sooner you let your clients know, the better, which is also why I think that putting the realtors on blast early helps. So think about all this time, resources, training, everything else. And then go back to my slide here. What are you going to charge? Because I don't see how a small business like our title agents have the ability to do all that work for free. If you're doing, let's say even it takes an hour and a half per one to report, and you have 10 a month, I don't do math, so I don't know why I did that, but think about the money that you're paying somebody, let's say a day's worth of time to report and figure it all out when you're not getting any money back for that. So I don't see any other way around it. I think you're gonna have to charge on your settlement, and it's gonna show up on your settlement statement. What you charge is up to you. I haven't even heard grumblings of what people are thinking, because you kind of have to think about how much time does that is. What does it work in your industry? I think each market will be different. Kansas City might charge something different than Little Rock, or Omaha might charge something different than Topeka, just depending on what the market is and what everybody else is doing in your area. So there's not a set charge out there, but just know that there likely is one. Then when I talked about that rush, so 2 days before closing, they decide, I'm not going to take it as an individual. I'm now going to do the Candi Slobodnik LLC. Well, now that I changed it, not only do you need me as the beneficial owner of that LLC to fill out information as the buyer, you now have to have the seller fill out their information. And think about if the seller already signed their pre-signed their docs. So pre-signed docs a week ago, you're holding them in escrow. And now you have to go back to that seller and say, hey, now that the buyer has changed who they're taking title into, I need you to fill out this additional information. So you're going to have somebody within your workflow. And at Fidelity, again, and I know I keep talking about Fidelity, but it's who I work for. We have a workflow process. So get your mind thinking about who's going to be checking on this stuff, who's going to make sure you have it all. So just keep in mind, with all of it coming up, likely expect to see a charge and maybe think about a rush charge. I have some agents who do a cash discount because they say, you're doing cash, I don't have a lender involved, it's a cheaper. They're going to take away that cash discount because now with the reporting, it kind of offsets. So whatever you do, think about it internally and how you charge. So biggest thing here is there is criminal civil penalties if you don't comply. So negligent just means I missed it. I missed the reporting. It's going to be $1,300 per violation, or up to 13, and then up to 108,000 for a pattern. So if I just forgot to do it 10 times, it's going to be whatever 10 times 13, whatever. Do your math. I don't do math. But if it's willful, saying screw this, screw the government, I'm not doing this, it could be up to $250,000. You could go to jail for 5 years, and then civil penalties on top of that. And I want to tell you, the person who's supposed to be reporting is that closing agent. So not only is it the title company, but it's your closer who could be the one fined for not reporting it correctly. The title agents I've talked to said there is no way I'm going to open my closer up to liability. So if we do not, and I noticed it's civil spelled wrong, that really bothers me. I'm gonna have to fix that on the next presentation. So if you're looking at this, sorry about that. But if you are a company in which you don't have that report filled out prior to closing, some people are saying, I'm not going to close this deal. It is not worth trying to get that information after closing. Think about it. You've already dispersed the funds. You have really no incentive for them to help you. Now you have a buyer moving into their new house or whatever it may be, and they're not paying attention and they can care less, and they're more likely to say no. Where if you require it on the front end and you say, I'm not closing without it, no, not only are you making sure you have the information, but you're also protecting your employees so that they don't run into afoul of getting a investigation by the government. So biggest thing again, and this is just like the first portion of it, explaining the rule, pay attention at order entry. I think that's where it really's got to go. If they change their mind, you guys got to know about this ASAP. If they're going to buy and out of an individual or an entity or a trust, you need to know that. If the buyer is hesitant, there's information here, and I believe everybody will have scripts to be able to say, you know, we're looking to stop money laundering, but also it's required by the federal government. We all have to do it, just like paying taxes. So commercial break. We decided my husband really wants alpacas, and I guess we decided to pivot, and I allowed him to get some ducks. We have 2 ducks, and these ducks are finally able to go out onto our property. And you see that nice pond back there? They refuse to actually get in it. They love their little baby swimming pool, and they swim in that thing. And we'll open it up, and I will say I got a little impatient and threw her into the water, and she immediately ran out of it. She was terrified of the pond. So they have this glorious pond and they're not using it. Hopefully someday they will. On the right is a picture of a remodeling of a garage. So that was a 1-car garage stall. My 18-year-old nephew moved in to go to college with us. And so my husband is revamping it into my office. And there's pretty wallpaper up there. He's now in the point where he is 100% in like HD TV mode, and he has blocked me from all social media channels because he's in there making it move-in ready, and I'm not allowed to see any of it until the big reveal. So I walked by it today outside, and he's literally put plastic over all the windows so that I can't even see in there. But the best part of this, and if you don't like these stories, I don't really care, I guess, because I'm going to tell it anyway. But to the left, because this was a garage, there is a water meter, like almost like a manhole cover. And we pull this water meter up, and in there is this huge concrete room. I'm telling you, it looks like a murder dungeon, and I clearly read too much books, but it is a concrete room underneath my garage. And we did find out it's a water cistern. But my husband thought it would be really funny to throw a fake skeleton down there that he purchased from Amazon, so that when the next person goes to remodel this because they don't like the wallpaper on the ceiling and they pull up the flooring, they're going to see this. So I have to show you, look at this. He literally put it down there. Somebody's going to open this water main at some point 30, 40 years from now when we sell our house, and they're going to freak out. They're going to call the cops, and they're going to have to go in there and get it, and it's literally going to be a plastic skeleton. I don't think this is against the law because I've been showing a lot of people. I think it's pretty funny, but just imagine your heart racing if you opened this manhole cover to find that. So, okay, back to, that was my commercial break. Back to, is it reportable? So again, we're starting with residential, but as you can see on the right, there are particular circumstances. So 1 to 4 family structure. So that makes sense. I'm in a house. It's going to be reportable. Intent to build. So if they buy a vacant lot, we know they're going to build a house on it. We now have to report. Condo or townhome, have to report. Co-op, report. Also, if it is an apartment building with 4 or less units, you have to report. So this is where that or it's not that certification. That's where commercial, it could be a commercial loan, but we still have to, or not loan because it's cash, but it could be a commercial property, but it's residential. Somebody else said, which is a good idea, zoning would let you know, is it zoned residential? Because it could make it so that it's now reportable. Okay. I was looking at the comments, but they're just happy about my skeleton. So thank you for that. So with all of these, we have the option, and as we go through these steps, there's this thing called certification. So if they certify, I have no intent to build, it's just a vacant lot. You can have them file or you can have them sign a certification. You're going to put that in your file. Just document that it was not reportable because of one of these reasons. Obviously, if it's a commercial transaction, you're buying or insuring a Dairy Queen, or there's a lender involved, you don't have to certify. But if there's any kind of gray area, you're going to just want to make sure that you're documenting in your file. Because with all of this stuff, you do have to hold it for 5 years. So if you report or certification or any of that stuff, you do have to hold it all for at least 5 years. The next thing up, 2 and 3, is it a cash deal? So if they're paying cash and it's residential, we have to report it. Now it gets a little gray when we're talking about lenders because the question is, do they have an anti-money laundering program? If they have one, it means that they're already reporting on individuals or sorry, entities. You don't need to do anything else because they're already regulated by the federal government. How do you know if a bank has an anti-money laundering? The easiest way to know is that they have an NMLS number. So in their signature block, if you look at a lender's, they're going to have NMLS and then they're going to have their number behind it. Just like with my title producer license, I have a number behind it. They're going to have an NMLS number and then they're going to have that. And if they have that, that means they have a AML program. You do not need to report. So again, document your file. What we're going to run into, though, is people are going to come back and say, well, I have a anti-money laundering. Well, if it's a Candi Slobodnik bank, probably I don't have one and I'm just lying to you. So this is where your gut check's going to go in a little bit. And this is where Ulta really pushed back. And they said, we can't just be responsible for all of this. So if somebody certifies to you that, yes, I have an anti-money laundering program, or yes, I have an exemption, as we talk about later, you are allowed to reasonably rely upon their statement unless you have documentation or information to the contrary. So if for some reason somebody, I'm sorry, Candi Slobodnik Bank, never heard of it, there's no website, I would not believe me. I would not rely on that certification. I would say we need to report on that. So you guys know when you talk to people, you come to underwriting all the time. You have questions or concerns. Just know that you do need to make sure that you feel good about it. Okay, what if there is a bank? Why is there a bank if it's a cash deal? And that's so it could be a smaller bank. Usually not. There isn't a bank. It's going to be a hard money lender. So hard money lenders are usually entities or trusts. Obviously, Candi Slobodnik Bank doesn't even exist. I just made it up. But if there's a bank, they're usually under this anti-money laundering program. We don't have to worry about it. Seller financing. So there is going to be maybe an insured lender. And that's where I'm getting at. Just because you're giving out a loan policy doesn't mean that it's automatically a non-reportable transaction because they do have to have this anti-money laundering program. Another thing to point out, a common misconception is cash deal. Is there a threshold? And I wish to God there was, but there is not. So if I am deeding to an LLC for no consideration, that is reportable. And if you don't take anything else away, you need to pay attention to this part. Because so many agents do courtesy recordings for their clients, or an attorney prepares a deed for their client. If an attorney prepares a deed for their client to an entity or trust, they are now responsible for reporting to FinCEN on that transaction, even if no money is paying value. If you record that, you're responsible for reporting. The only way it's not reportable is if Joe Schmo out there goes online, gets his own deed, and does his own recording. And there's even talk in the industry that recorders could be responsible for reporting if nobody else does. I don't think they're going to do that. I think that's a far-reaching event, and I frankly don't want recorders involved with trying to do this. But just know if you're recording those, you're now responsible, even if no money is changing hands. I know in the Kansas City area, agents are saying we're not going to do courtesy recordings anymore because you're not making any money. Think about that, 2.5 hours to get all that information, and maybe you're charging a recording fee or something nominal. So make sure you're paying attention to that and you're documenting or figuring out your internal processes. Hopefully, we'll have some kind of valuation. I think the GTOs are 300,000. So it's weird. It's weird to me. I don't understand why we take that away. 300,000 would be most of our houses in Kansas. So it would help out a lot. But it's something that just know it could be $0. If it's entity or trust, it's reportable. Okay. I feel like that was a soapbox, but it's so important and people don't understand it. Is the buyer individual entity or trust? Again, I think I've hit this one enough. I'm going to go through this. So is there an exemption? On the seller side, the seller does not have to report if one of these things apply. And I'm not going to go through all of them, but it's pretty clear that if the bank is involved, or sorry, the court is involved, probably not money laundering in there. So bankruptcy, estate, court supervised transfer, so divorce, you're going to see that deed. It's all in relation to some kind of court proceeding happening, and we're able to move forward. Also, not a lot of money laundering happening with conveyance of easements. So if it's only an easement, so when are we seeing easements where we had insure? Conservation easements, cell tower easements, maybe a billboard easement. Those aren't reportable because, again, they're not really money laundering off of those because it's so little in value. One I really want to point out here is the 1031 exchange because I'm getting a lot of questions on those. With 1031s, it is not reportable when it goes to the QI, that qualified intermediary. So we're going to deed it to the QI, have it in the parking lot until we find our other property. But once we deed out to that, if it's an entity or a trust, it's now reportable. So to the QI, not reportable. To an entity or trust at the end, it is reportable. And it's because the QI, that qualified intermediary, just along with the court or others, are already governed by other rules and regulations. So the QI is already having to do that. Obviously, too, if there's no reporting person, there's an exemption as well. But there is a cascade of reporting people. I don't know if it's like 8 to 10 long. So again, closing agents up top. I think at some point it gets to the underwriter, that attorney who prepares the deed, whoever records it. So there's enough people that the likelihood of no reporting person is literally in that scenario where the person goes online, gets their own deed, does their own recording, and no agent or anybody within that chain touches it. Now we're going to go on to trust. There are a couple exemptions for trust. One of them is if it's estate planning purposes only trust. But how many times have you seen a trust that is a special purpose entity? So only for one purpose. Are they only for estate planning? Or do they also have investment property in there or using it for other means? If they're using it for estate planning purposes only, I would have them file a certification. I'd have that put in your file and move on down the road because now you don't have to report on it. But if you can't tell, so if it's the Candi Slobodnik Family Trust, likely it's estate planning purposes. I would have me certify, put it in your file, move on down the road. The other types of trusts are trustees or statutory trusts. So trustees that are already governed by the federal government for securities reporting or something like that, or statutory trusts that are created, which I don't think we're going to see a lot of, but just know that they're out there and they're exempt because they're already reporting in some fashion. Or if it's estate planning, probably not money laundering because you're literally giving it to yourself. Now with entities, here's a whole laundry list of exemptions. Again, if you see this common denominator, just like with the exemptions for the trust, they're all federally regulated in some form or fashion. So the federal government is already aware of them and is already able to review them if needed. There are my dudes. So Dublin and Copper, and then Henry and Franklin when they were still little. Okay, documenting exemptions using certifications. Alta has sample certifications, and think about it. So let's say that the trust is an estate planning trust and you want them to certify. This certification is 9 pages long and has a slew of information. At this point, you could just have them fill out the form, in my opinion. But do know that there's sample certifications out there provided by Alta. Go online, you can get those. Your underwriter can probably point you in the right direction to them. But as you can see, just from the little screenshots, there's a lot of information in there. And it's just like with the seller, same thing. You have these documents, and you can see a little bit better clip here on the side of is there an exemption? Yes, exemption. Go on to box 2. So while the 9 pages might not all have to be filled out, and as you can see, 1 page is literally just instructions of how to fill it out, it's still a lot of information from the buyer or the seller. So if they have that exemption, you also need to just keep in mind who's signing this. Is it somebody who's actually able to be signing it, or they have knowledge? So again, the buyer, same thing. If we have an exemption, there is a sample form for you to be able to have them fill out. Do they fall in one of those exemptions? Click, 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 move on down the road. I will say, if it were me in any of these forms, I would be using DocuSign or something like that. I would make it so that each thing has to be filled out, because in FinCEN's mind, it is not a full report unless it's completely filled out. So the last thing you want to do is leave half of it blank, and then FinCEN says that wasn't good enough, and now you have to go back and try to get that additional information from somebody after the fact. So I would make sure, sometimes you can make it so it's required versus optional. I make everything required, and then either make it so they can put not available or not applicable or none in spaces, but make sure it's all required on your form. But then I'd also have somebody reviewing it, because what if the buyer just went in there and put non-applicable for everything? You can't rely upon that. You're going to need them to actually give you that information. So gather the details. You're getting all that. It's reportable. Now, what do you do? And again, Henry, and so that's them on the left, obviously, and that's Henry on my lap right there. He's 93 pounds now. So we went for mini golden doodles and got some big ones, but love them very much. They are my babies. Okay. Required information for buyers. And to me, this is egregious. It's really hard for us to get information from an LLC just to get their operating agreement or the bylaws from an entity. And as we walk through this stuff, you're going to be like, oh Lord, this is why we want to end our purchase contract. This is why we need to let them know early, because it's so much information, and it's not always information that you would readily have or be keeping. So name, address, phone number, relationship to the buyer. So who is this person? Because it has to be an individual filling it out. Are they the right person to be filling out this form? Do they have the requisite knowledge to be able to fill it out? And are they not? So it says competency here, and it's not asking, do they have dementia and can't answer? It's more, do they have the information that's needed to fill this out? And again, the final form has not been released by FinCEN yet. So it's our understanding the form is not going to change, but they haven't released it yet. So we have the sample form that Alta has, but it's not released or considered final from FinCEN. Do know that all of your software providers and vendors are looking at ways to be able to help you pre-populate this, because you already have in your commitment the name, address, phone, email, or some of that information. Hopefully the vendors are able to pull that information into this report. So then when you're sending it to your buyer through via DocuSign or whatever, they're only filling out a couple of them instead of the whole thing. And they're just verifying that the rest is accurate. So that's the plan of attack. But again, we need the final form so that the coders and everybody can do what they need to do on the back end to make sure, the integrations and everything work. So entity, we need the legal name of the entity, a trade name. Are they going by a DBA? Street address of the principal place of business. You cannot take a PO box, because think about the federal government. If they wanted to go raid this place, they can't go raid a PO box. They need an actual residential address or a place of business. And then their unique ID, either a TIN number or their entity number. The BOI information, and I think that's why people sometimes get confused that this BOI is different than the BOI reporting that's just entity or foreign entities. This BOI is part of the RRER, that residential real estate report. You have to have this information. So who controls the entity? Who owns the entity? And they each have to sign this document. So If they have more than 25% ownership interest, they have to fill out this report and sign it. If they control it, so the CEO, the CFO, whoever it may be, individually must be listed and also has to sign. So you can see on the right in the potential form the ability for them to say control owns and then signing right there. So you might have one person doing all the reporting, but you still have to have the owners at least sign this portion. And I think people don't realize, like, oh, I can just fill it out on behalf of the LLC. Well, if I own it with three other people, all three of us have to fill out this portion. So keep that in mind when you're looking at building out reports and working with your entities. For trusts, it's going to be pretty similar. Full legal name of the trust, date of execution, is it revocable, and then your TIN number. The buyer trust, we need the full legal name, the trustee entity, including trade or DBA, date of birth for the individual trustee, address, and again, it cannot be a PO box, country of citizenship, unique identifiers, and reason for reporting individual. So why is this person the person signing? What is their relationship, essentially their competency for it? So as you can see, we don't get this information right now when we're insuring. We get a certification of trust, or we get an operating agreement, or maybe a resolution. We're not asking for all of this in detail. It is going to be new to your clients, and they're not going to understand or be prepared to give you the level of what they're having to provide. So reasons for reporting individuals' relationships with the trust, I have that all there. But I'm going to keep going because we're going to run short on time, and I have a couple more things I want to make sure I hit. Of course, with the Chiefs, I had to throw them in there. And then all four of them are in that picture. Copper is my Velcro dog. He is with me everywhere I go. And then I'm a big reader, so always a stack of books on my end table. Okay, required information for the sellers. So we talked about the buyers and what they're needing, but what do we need for the sellers? Individual information, entity information, trust information. Again, we're looking at the person completing the form. Who are they? What's their relationship to the seller? If it's a trust or entity, relationship to that trust or entity. And you're going to be thinking, are they the right person for this position? Are they the right person to fill out this information? And you can see in the form on the right, it's relationship to seller transfer. Is it the individual seller, accountant, attorney, real estate agent? Who's filling out this information? What do we need to know about that individual seller? Name, date of birth, residential address, unique ID number. Again, no PO box. Information about an entity, same kind of thing. So you can kind of see a pattern. Individual, entity, trust, you're going to be asking for it. It's just a little bit different as to what specifically, but it's all right there laid out in the form. And then here's your trust information as well of what you would be filling out. So this is where I think it gets egregious. And I think you're going to get a lot more pushback, because not only are they filling out information about their entities and ownership interests and having all the owners sign, but now they have to give you where their funds are coming from. So if I have an LLC and I'm purchasing, I now have to give you my method of payment, my bank account number, the amount of the payment, and if it will be transferred into the agent's escrow trust account. So again, we have a hard time getting LLC docs. Now I'm going to ask you for your banking information. And now think about this. You're going to have this in a report on your computer or within your company. So if you weren't a target for cyber fraud, even more so now, because you're going to have even more documentation that you'll be holding on to for that 5-year period. And then there's that certification at the end saying, I certified to the best of my knowledge, and they're going to sign it. And that's at the end of the form. So again, entire certification must be stored for 5 years. Do we have a designation agreement? So did you designate a vendor or somebody else to report on your behalf? You're going to have that attached to this as well. You're going to want to keep that. And then what about when you submit this report to FinCEN? How are you going to make sure that you show that you've submitted that report. Some people are going to do screenshots of the submission, because I can tell you, and you should be going on the government's website now and signing up for your ability to report. And again, if you're a Fidelity agent, we literally have screenshots of step-by-step processes of how to do that and how to sign up for it. And there is a queue at the end where you can see the ones that you've reported. But knowing that you have to hold this for 5 years, I would just worry, is the government going to keep that queue always there? Or what happens if it goes away? For my own peace of mind, I'd probably want some kind of documentation in my own file that it was submitted or something. You're also going to want to think about just workflow. When are you going to submit these reports? So let's say you've agreed that I am going to require it prior to closing, and I'm going to have it. There is a duty to report it. There's two options. It's the longer of the two. 30 days from the date of closing or the end of the next month. And the only time that 30 days after closing might be longer is if you close in January, because February is 28 days. But typically, the end of the next month will be the longer one. Some of my larger agents are saying, we're just going to have somebody report every 2 weeks so that we're never falling behind. So anything that closed in the last 2 weeks that's reportable, we're just going to go in and do it. Now, if you're a smaller organization, you might do it every 30 days. You just want to make sure you're watching that window. And it is my understanding that if you have all these reports, you're able to batch upload them. So you don't have to go in and key in each one, I believe. You can just batch upload all of the ones for 2 weeks up, and then you report them all at one time. One thing I did find out last week when I was in Memphis, you have to fill out the legal description for the property within the report. And there is 1,000-character word limit, there's a 1,000-character limit. So think about your meets and bounds description. Obviously, lot and block, we can get there. I've seen plenty of legal descriptions that are more than 1,000 characters. So how are you going to make sure that you're describing this property correctly? They want you to put the property address as well. So I do think that helps. But a lot of times we might have multiple parcels and trying to figure out the best way. I don't know if we're all going to go to like the assessor shorthand where you can kind of tell what they're saying, but not, or are you going to put the first 1,000 characters and call it good? So think about that as well and talk internally and kind of make those decisions so that whoever is your reporting person isn't having to do all that on the fly and freak out because they don't know what they're doing. Okay. Again, there's the doodles. Love the hammock. And then I got a love sack, and they absolutely love it. They think it's their dog bed. Most expensive dog bed I've ever purchased, but super comfortable. If you guys like beanbags, great. Okay, information about the property, like I said, street address, legal description, and you're going to be putting in the date of closing. Luckily, that's all stuff you all can fill out. It's not something that you would need the buyer or seller to fill out. I mean, you could have them do it, but it's there. But again, just think about the unauthorized practice of law. Do you actually know the answer to these? So we're here to educate and help. But again, it is a federal rule, so you can always refer them to the rule. If somebody tells you that they're not going to give you the information, you have a duty to file what we call an SAR, a suspicious activity report. And I will tell you that if you do that, the government now will go investigate that person. Every suspicious activity report is something where it requires an investigation because they could be somebody who could be at a disservice to the United States. So if it were me, I would not want to file any of those because last thing I want to do is go after my clients for that. So you're really going to want to push them to give you this information. Again, I would just say don't close if you don't have the information, but it is something that you need to make sure you have those processes and practices in place of how you're going to handle it. Now, I have 5 minutes and I'm going to go through a couple of these examples because I do think they're helpful. I decided to take some of my favorite movies and some of my friends. So like a couple of these I haven't actually seen, but I created FinCEN scenarios in which I want you to kind of think about, is this reportable or not? So the first one, my favorite movie, Shawshank Redemption. So here is my example. Andy Dufresne has a motto of get busy living or get busy dying, and has decided to follow his lifelong dream of purchasing a bar and grill called Shawshank on the Texas-Mexico border in the amount of $3 million cash. Is this a reportable transaction under the new FinCEN rule? Why or why not? So I want you to think about this. What are we looking at? We have Andy Dufresne is an individual, but he's purchasing a bar and grill. So essentially going to probably be commercial. There might be somebody who's like, well, what if there's a live-in garage up top or something, or apartment or something like that? And then it's 3 million cash. So 3 million cash makes it reportable, but since it's commercial, I would argue it is not reportable for this process. But this just kind of gets your way of thinking a little bit. I'm going to skip a couple of these. I'm going to go to Star Wars. So Luke Skywalker and his friend Chewbacca decided to go into business together and invest in intergalactic rental properties. Because they don't have a lot of equity themselves, they decide to borrow funds from C3PO Bank, which files SARs when appropriate. Is this a reportable transaction under the new rules? So we have rental properties, but they're also using a bank which we know files SARs. So that suspicious activity reports, which is required under the anti-money laundering program. Because of that, it's not going to be reportable. And also, this is a US regulation. We don't insure outside of the US. So somebody was like, well, it's intergalactic. Is it in the US or not? So for purposes of, this easy example, we're going to say it would be US based. This one I enjoy as well. So we'll hit this one and then we'll wrap it up. But David Witterson and his friends, Pink, Don, and Ron Slater, decide to form an entity called All Right, Incorporated. With their new entity, they plan on investing in residential rental properties around Lee High School in Austin, Texas. They're going to buy the first 5 houses with cash, and then after that, plan on getting a loan through an institutional lender. Are these reportable transactions? So you'll have 4 guys that created a corporation. They're purchasing residential rental properties around US, and they're going to buy 5 houses with cash. So is it reportable? Yes, they're reportable for the first 5 houses. Once they go get that lender, not reportable, but we do have a corporation. And think about that form we have them filling out. If all 4 of them own 25% each, they all need to sign as a beneficial owner interest. So if this incorporation or this corporation was owned by maybe another corporation or another trust, which we see sometimes, you need to peel back that onion until you get to an individual who can sign. And because all 4 of these, I'm assuming they're lifelong friends, they're splitting it 25, 25, 25, 25. They're all going to sign that form. Although David Witterson might be able to fill the form out all together, that one page will need to be signed by all of them. So I am going to wrap up my time. I did have a couple others. I will tell you, I've never seen The Godfather, but it was fun to write that one out. Biggest thing is there is my email. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. Clearly, FinCEN has been kind of my baby right now in helping people reach out to your own underwriters. They have information. If you're with Fidelity, reach out to Kim Majors or Tron. They'll be able to help you. But I appreciate you all letting me come in. And I will say this is the first time I've ever talked to you guys and actually spoke the full hour. So I'm also proud of myself.
Is it okay if I disperse your slides to our members?
So I am going to say I'm going to take out obviously pictures of my dogs, and I am going to take out the movie quotes because those are something that we at Fidelity are kind of going to use as a social media way to get people involved. But I will share the other content. So let me get it in a handout form, and I will get those to Melissa.
Awesome. Thank you so much for doing this. It's important and it's coming up and it's complicated. So thank you so much for teaching us all about it. And we'll probably have you back to explain it some more after it hits.
Yeah, no problem. Okay, have a great day, guys.
Bye.
Bye.